Hey, what is going on, guys? My name is ThePromG and welcome back to a brand new video. Now, what I have for you guys today is a manga review of Inuyashiki by Hiroya Oku. Now, I actually got interested in this series originally because Hiroya Oku is the mangaka behind Gantz, my favorite series of all time, so I figured I'd be interested in picking this series up, and I did. I picked up all 10 volumes and read them all in one night a few days ago, so I figured I had to do a manga review on Inuyashiki. If you guys do enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more manga videos, and yeah, without further ado, let's get right into the manga review. So in the opening scene of the manga, we're introduced to our main character, Ichiro Inuyashiki. He's a 58-year-old man, and he's shown in his car with his family of four, including his wife, daughter, and son. They're in the car, and they're going to their new house after a recent move. And one thing that's made very clear right off the bat is that Inuyashiki gets absolutely no respect from his family whatsoever. For example, when they're going to the house, the daughter thinks that the house they're moving into is this really big mansion, but it turns out that's actually owned by their neighbor, and compared to the neighbor's house, their house is just not as big, so therefore it's worthless, and Inuyashiki gets insulted for being a cheapskate and stuff like that, even though he spent all his savings on this house. And when they're inside the house unpacking their belongings, Inuyashiki asks his family for some help because he has a bad back and some other health conditions. But his family blows him off, and they decide to go out to eat at a restaurant without him, leaving to do it all himself. And even when he's commuting to and from work and just outside his house, he's also getting belittled and harassed by other people, like on the subway, for example. And it really just makes you feel bad for him because he's this tiny, old, shriveled up, shaky man who just gets shoved around and isn't really given the time of day at all. And if things couldn't get any worse for Inuyashiki, one day he checks the mail and sees a letter from the doctor saying that he needs to come in for additional testing following his recent tests. And after the additional testing, the doctor diagnoses him with stomach cancer, and at maximum, he's given 3 months to live. This shocking news kind of puts Inuyashiki into a depressive state, and rightfully so, just adding on to the fact that his family doesn't really show their love for him at all. Even when he tries to make the announcement to his family at dinner that he has cancer, they won't even let him talk, which is not only disrespectful but also really sad. So one night when he's especially depressed, he decides to go out and take his dog for a walk to the park. And when they actually get to the park, something very odd happens. That being some kind of thing from space with these aliens or robots comes down and actually hits Inuyashiki and another bystander that are at the park. Miraculously, Inuyashiki actually survives this collision, wakes up the next morning, and he goes home. And as he's going throughout the day, he realizes that some things are not quite adding up like they were the day before. For example, he no longer needs to eat, he's never really hungry anymore, but he does get thirsty, and steam starts coming out of his hands and his arms, and eventually a gun comes out of his arm. Now it's at this point that Inuyashiki realizes that he is now a robot. He's no longer human, which at first is unsettling to him, but then he realizes that he no longer has cancer. He also gets some power-ups, as you would imagine, from becoming a robot, such as flying, being able to heal the sick, and being able to hear people's voices from afar. Now just a couple of days ago, Inuyashiki thought that he was just some old man who had worn out his time on Earth and couldn't do anything right, but now he realizes that he can use these new powers to do as much good for humanity as possible. Now after all this unfolds, we're introduced to our second main character, that being the other bystander who's at the collision site at the park that one night with Inuyashiki, who is a complete stranger but also got hit by this same thing from space. And he also gets upgraded to a robot with all the same features, but let's just say that he has a little bit of a different idea about what he's going to use these powers for than Inuyashiki. Hiro discovers that he can use these powers to do evil, such as manipulating ATMs to withdraw unlimited amounts of money and killing people. So it's needless to say that they have a different ideology of how to use these powers. So the story kind of shows how these two characters use their powers for different reasons, how Inuyashiki on one end of the spectrum uses power to do good, which is the only way of feeling human, and how Hiro uses his power to do as much harm as possible, which is the only way that he feels anything. Now for the most part, I think the storytelling in Inuyashiki is done really well. There are never really moments where the story stagnates or you feel like nothing is happening. There's always something constantly going on with either Inuyashiki or Hiro. Now one thing that I think is interesting about this series is that even though it's called Inuyashiki, and Inuyashiki is the kind of focus of the overall plot, most of the story is dealing with Hiro, the other main character in the story, and how he goes about his life, doing harm, and his relationship with his family and his friends and stuff like that. And I feel like this was probably the right call because Hiro is definitely a more interesting character, I feel like, than Inuyashiki. And don't get me wrong, Inuyashiki is a great character, but I feel like there's a lot that they could have done with him that they just didn't do. Of course, they lay out the groundworks that he's an old man who gets no respect and he's frail, and he gets these powers and does all this good. But other than that, there's not a whole lot of development for him. He was always a good person, but then eventually, after he got hit by the thing, he just had the means to do good. But other than that, there's really no development for him. Hiro, on the other hand, has lots of development throughout the story, and just does more interesting things throughout. Even though it's not too much of a drastic difference between their time in the manga, but I think it was definitely the right call. The first few volumes kind of go back and forth, showing one good thing that Inuyashiki does, and then one bad thing that Hiro does, and eventually it all comes together and they become aware of each other, and then it brings you into the conflict between the two characters, as it's kind of the fight versus evil and good. So there's not too much I can critique with the story. Other than that, I wish they would have done more with Inuyashiki and developed his character, because I feel like there's a lot more depth that they could have gotten into, but they just didn't, and they kind of played it safe with him not really changing it all throughout the story. Now, as far as characters go, there isn't really an expansive main cast. I think that's a good thing for a series this short. They don't throw a whole lot of characters at you, and the ones that are in the manga are pretty relevant, that being Inuyashiki, Hiro, then you have Hiro's friend, and then you have Inuyashiki's family. That's basically it, and all of the main characters that I include in the manga feel meaningful to the story in one way or another. Now, like I mentioned earlier, I think that Inuyashiki could have had more development, but Hiro, on the other hand, is a really interesting character who has lots of depth to him. Even though he's really evil, I think that Hiro is probably my favorite character in the series, just because of all the things that play into his character that makes him really interesting. Other than that, there isn't a lot to say about the characters. It's a really short series and there aren't a whole lot of characters, so I think we'll just leave it at that. The characters are good, and Hiro is an especially amazing character. Now, when I was reading Gantz, one thing that absolutely blew me away was the amazing artwork, and needless to say, in Inuyashiki, the art is spectacular. It has the same kind of dark, realistic style that you can expect from other works of his. I also like the way that Oku draws faces. Sometimes there's lots of shading and other times there's not really much, but either way, lots of emotion is able to be shown on the faces of the characters. Now, one thing that I didn't actually expect to like as much as I did is the action scenes in Inuyashiki. Now, obviously there's going to be some badass action accompanying becoming a robot, such as lasers to hand-to-hand combat. It's all here in this manga, and it's all done extremely well. There are even some instances where in some fight scenes there'll be like one singular punch that'll get spread out into like several two-page spreads, which kind of gives you the play-by-play action of one singular motion. I think it's really cool, and it's executed really well in this manga. Another strength of Gantz that I think is also present in this manga is the world building. Just because it's so realistic and the art is so well done, it really does a good job at immersing you into this Japan environment. Now, another thing that kind of ties into the artwork is the panel work. That being that there's not a lot of text on each panel, and this allows the manga to just flow and be a really quick read. So the big question, do I recommend you read Inuyashiki? The answer is absolutely yes. If you did like Gantz, didn't read Gantz, or you love Gantz, either way, I think that you'll find something you enjoy. The story's told at a good pace, it doesn't drag on for too long, the characters are amazing, and the artwork is just fantastic. So if you enjoy good artwork, good characters, or good story, I think that you'll definitely find something you enjoy in Inuyashiki. Overall, I give the Inuyashiki manga an 8 out of 10. There are definitely some things that I wish would have been added, but there's nothing in the actual manga that I wish would have been taken out, that I feel was too abrasive or just annoying. So that being said, I give the series a strong 8 out of 10. So that's going to wrap up this manga review for Inuyashiki by Hiroya Oku. If you guys did enjoy this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more manga reviews just like this. So yeah, this has been ThePromG. Hopefully you enjoyed the video, and as always, hope to catch you in the next one.